There's actually a lot of questions that we need to get to, so might as well just get started. Emma, unless you want to say a little something as well.
Hi. Nice. I came to enjoy this weekly session, so I'm very happy also to have Hein with me today to help out with some of the more technical stuff. Not that I am not a technical person myself, but it's nice to pretend that I am doing business stuff a lot of the time.
Exactly.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, let's get started then. There's a ton of questions around DuskEVM because that's on everybody's mind. But let's build up the questions as we go and start with a simple one. The first one would be, when multisig and web wallet for staking?
Yeah, so this is one of those things. It's a nice feature. But it's not really a top priority for us, right? So we have a lot of stuff to do, and this is not on our list. I'm not sure if there's an issue already for this, but if someone in the community really wants this feature, I would strongly recommend them to write themselves or have someone write the issue with what they want, and then we will put it in our backlog, right, and handle it when we have the capacity for it. But someone else can also pick it up if they feel so inclined, which is, in my opinion, even better.
Of course, and if anyone does want to open up an issue or a ticket on our GitHub at any time, you can find the link in our support tab. So that's an easy way to find it in case you haven't found it so far. Thank you, Hein. The next question is okay. So this I have to read quite a lot on this one. So Switzerland is not part of EU, so MiCA does not apply here. But as a Swiss, I know we have some other regulations, but more technology neutral financial regulations. Are you guys in talk with non-EU institutions like from Switzerland too? It looks like some banks here are ready or looking for blockchain adoption, but have not really started yet because they're missing privacy features. So it would be nice to see Dusk get some attention in Switzerland. The main question.
The short answer is yes. We are definitely in touch with different institutions in Switzerland. The interesting thing is that when we are talking about Europe, sometimes we are talking about the European Union. Sometimes we are talking about the EEA, which is the extended part. So it is the European Union plus Switzerland plus UK, right? And I consider those also legislations that are very, very close to the European one. In some cases, they are even ahead of the curve. For instance, it has been in terms of legislation, it has been already the case in Switzerland to have the capability of doing native issuance of stocks of different kind of equities. And although basically there isn't really, these are not really legal to do in Europe without the DLT-TSS, and there is an entire legislation in Switzerland that allows to do that. The tokenization of stocks, the tokenization of a lot of different things. Real estate is also pretty big there. We have been in touch with a couple of organizations there of differently sized. Some of them were startups, some others were a little more established. It seems like there is a huge opportunity also there because there is a kind of a battle going on among different kind of providers, different kind of even brokers, because they do want to be first in the tokenization game, and that's because the legislation again is actually very very accepting of these these kind of new opportunities. Together with that, there are also, I would say primarily there are two different kind of institutions, or the type of institutions that we are talking to. One has got to do with, they are the main institutions in Switzerland, as a matter of fact. One is basically private banking, and private banking has to do with the fact that there are a lot of high net worth individuals, and they are very interested in actually investing in crypto. But investing in crypto as a high net worth individual doesn't really mean that you go out and you buy a bunch of tokens and you do self-custody or something like that. You normally do that through a private bank or private banking and wealth management services. So there are a lot of these private banks, and they are there is a very interesting synergy between these private banking parties, these private banking institutions, and a lot of different other kind of banking institutions which are not private, but they private banking arm leg, so to speak, in Italy. So there is a very close collaboration between Italy, for what concerns the banking sector, between Italy and Switzerland. So those are part of the institutions that we are talking to. There isn't really any immediate use case that we can serve there, other than just get in touch, doing a little bit of lobbying and understanding basically how the market evolves, because these are essentially just different way. They are not entirely aligned, or they are not entirely relevant for what concerns settlement, for what concerns infrastructure, for what concerns what we are trying to do, but it's very relevant in terms of assets. So as soon as basically we have different kind of assets and assets that are actually interesting for them, then having a vehicle through these bankings in order essentially to open up other kind of distribution lines, distribution pipelines, that is basically a strategic move. So nothing in the very short term, but that's definitely from a strategic perspective is very, very good to have these kind of relationships. The other thing is, venues, like exchanges and these kind of things. There is one that is pretty big and it's pretty forward-looking, which is CEST, which we have been talking to in the past. We are not really doing or we are not really having a working partnership with them, but we know each other and we talk with each other, and there are a lot of different things that they are interested in doing in terms, from what concerns the infrastructure perspective. Now, again, that too is a strategic move. It's not exactly something short term, because while the private banking part is very, very much related to the, to the northern Italian banking system, the exchanges and these kind of assets, in fact, they are actually closer to the southern part of Germany. So, for instance, it's not very really southern part, but so to speak, they are they're very close to Bayern and that kind of the kind of area, but also Stuttgart, for instance, and other kind of very big financial poles, so to speak. So, and there is actually very good for us to have a relationship with one of the main actors in the area, which is 21X, which operates in Frankfurt, so in the northern part of Germany, but Max, the CEO, actually lives on the Lake of Constance, which is very, very much in the south, and borders with Switzerland, borders with Austria, and borders with, and is in Germany. Actually, he's in Austria, but borders with Germany and Switzerland too. So having a relation or having a direct partnership with 21X actually helps out in having conversation and establishing a strategic line of business together with venues in Switzerland. So the short, like I said, the short answer was yes. There are asset issuers that are interested in talking to us. We also have been in touch with different kind of startups and applications that want to have specifically, products in real estate tokenization. Also something in commodity with, but that is for much later because we are not really that kind of RWA protocol. But we have been talking to them, and they would be interested in issuing some kind of commoditization or commodities like gold and precious stones on top of Dusk. but nothing in the short term, because again we are fully focused on putting assets that are those that we want to vet heavily in the very short term.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, right, so one of the more important things is we're not just looking at European Union, but EEA, so the whole market there, and then looking for asset providers to provide products to investors, right? That can be high net worth individuals, that can be anyone basically, right?
Right.
As
Yeah.
a succinct summary of what you said, yeah.
No, those are some good insights and gives a good idea of the long-term plans as well, what comes up. So thank you guys. Now this is a bit of more of a technical question, Hein. Someone is asking what is the DuskEVM layer under the hood, because it sounds like a modified GEF. I hope that's how you pronounce it. I don't know, GEF, or perhaps an OPGEF implementation that serves as the basis. If that is the case, was that reused, and what had to be built on top of it?
Well, if you look at DuskEVM as an architecture, it's optimism derived L2, right? Except we use it a bit differently from a component point of view, like how we integrate the L2 into Dusk is different. That's also why we have a couple of different naming schemes in place now, because it's not really a traditional L1, L2 setup. But the node itself, so the DuskEVM node, is an OP-get node, which is at this point not modified, right? So what we have in place is, if you look at OP-get, the structure of optimism, what they have in place is they have a node. The node processes transactions. That's what is one of the parts of DuskEVM. There is contracts on the L2 and on the L1. These L1 contracts are normally written in Solidity and deployed on an EVM system. And one of the things we had to do was port those contracts over to something that's Dusk compatible. So that's a big part of the work that we had to do. Another big part of the work that we had to do was the communication between the two systems. So what is currently the Dusk L1, which we are going to call DuskDS going forward, the Dusk Data Availability and Settlement Layer. The translation between what's happening there and DuskEVM is something that we needed to do. And that also has some differences, right? Because the systems are completely different. And then we had to introduce blob transactions into Dusk itself. So those are the main components. So we did some changes to DuskDS, the L1, by adding blob transaction types like they have in Ethereum. A little bit different implementation from what Ethereum has, but it's not that different. Then we had the contract ports, and we have a translation layer.
Hey, yeah, thank you, Hein. I was just reading now the question from these lights as well. He had a quick question regarding this.
I can answer this one. Yeah, so the question is, did anyone on our side already have experience with Ethereum and help during the creation process? So I think some people already figured out that we have the help of an external party to help us with this. The idea of doing DuskEVM came after Emma and I had some internal discussions about a number of different topics. And I, in the past, had experience of working with for a L2 that heavily modified optimism to do a different form of settlement. So we came up with some ideas, and we worked through this. And my impression was that it was relatively easy to port this over, right? For the returns you can get from it. So we did an initial project plan where we explained what we were expecting, right, from this DuskEVM project and what the work was supposed to be that we should do. And initially, we had the external party do an analysis of that project plan that we did. And we had certain parts we asked them to build where they were more, let's say, experienced. we have some people that have Ethereum experience, but not that much. So we've been slowly having our team on board onto the project as well. And there are a couple of people that are doing some really key work on that as well, porting over the contracts because they have the DuskDS knowledge and the contract development knowledge on our side, right? So for them, all they had to do was understand how does the Solidity code look like and what are the code semantics, and port that over. And obviously, we have the most experience on our side on how transactions look like in Dusk. So, for example, Sapia has been working on adding the blob transactions on our side.
Right. Yeah.
But the third party, for example, is also there to validate this work.
Which I do understand is almost complete, correct? The blob transaction.
Yeah, it's indefinite. We have it indefinite. We do not have this in the UX yet. For example, the Explorer, but I open issue for that today. So that's something that can relatively quickly be picked up because it's a really minor change to what we have. And then people can also see, for example, blob transactions come in. I already have one that I can probably share. This one, I'll drop it in the chat for those that are really technically gifted and feel like exploring the edges a bit. They can already hop in. But we introduced, for example, on transactions a new field, and only after a certain version you can now see blob hashes. Blob hashes are basically proofs that you can verify that a given transaction has the correct data coupled with it. We're implementing the blobs in a similar style as Ethereum is doing. So we will have a sidecar available, and once we have that public, people can also query the underlying data. But for most people, this is just an implementation detail, but this is key for us to do the data availability aspect of our architecture.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, any piece of little snippet is highly appreciated, and I know there are a couple of community members which do like to get in the tiny little details. So thanks for that. And of course, with all the changes that are happening with DuskEVM, DuskDS, some people are also wondering if there's going to be, will there be a node for DuskDS and another one for DuskEVM, or are they going to be combined in some way? And he's saying, for example, will it look for a user like a single installation and executable? And is there perhaps even a reuse of resources behind the scenes? Example, the communication layer between nodes?
Yeah, so these will be two different nodes. The setup is very similar to a traditional L2 in a way, right? So you have, like, for example, in Ethereum setups with Optimism, you have an Ethereum node, and then you have an Optimism node. And these two, they communicate to each other through data availability and message passing. We would have a similar setup, but what we will do is we will have a little bit tighter connection with the L2. People can, in theory, run a validator node for DuskEVM, but the only reason for them to do that in the architecture we envision is to provide services like blockchain data, right? Like to query for historical information, because we have a couple of pathways forward to get to instant finality or close to same block finality, let's say, for the L2 as well. There are some pathways we are exploring, and in that sense, our L1 would then be the node that also validates the correctness of the DuskEVM transactions. And this optimistic architecture would then turn into like a pessimistic, optimistic architecture, where we basically reject all possible fraudulent activity.
All right, if I can spend a couple of words here. So I would like to reprehend Hein quite badly, because he is violating his own, his own rules about terminology, considering that he is constantly shouting at us that we shouldn't really talk about a layer 1 and a layer 2, because as a matter of fact, they are not a layer 1 and a layer 2. Now he's doing it from the community. So since this is also
very bad, I'm a hypocrite.
a decentralized organization, just shame on you. You shouldn't do this and confuse everybody. So let's actually disentangle a little bit what Hein is saying. So from a technical perspective, why it is absolutely true that we started out as with a layer 1 and a layer 2, the architecture actually evolved into that of a data availability and settlement layer and an application layer. What does that mean? Well, it means essentially that we are, when we are going to launch, which again the launch is really imminent. I want to reassure everybody that basically it's not going to take that much time. Hopefully, we are going to see something on the DevNet very soon, and I would like to stress the very part. Anyways, without really saying anything about dates or timelines, make out what you will out of that. However, from a certain perspective, then the difference between the Dusk architecture and Optimism and Ethereum, for instance, or the layer 2 and the layer 1 architectures that other protocols have, is the fact that basically they are two different projects. They are two different protocols. They are two different networks. They are two different layer 2s and layer 1, right? So they are two different nodes, two different everything, right? And the layer 1 has a very specific focus that has got nothing to do with the applications that are, or applications, programs, whatever, that are normally deployed on itself and on the layer 2. So the layer 2 is in fact an application on top of the layer 1. This is what Ethereum does. You can create smart contracts on Ethereum, you can have dApps on Ethereum. Other dApps on Ethereum are these layer 2s. What does this mean in practice? It means in practice that Ethereum needs to remain independent, and therefore it cannot make any assumption of what the layer 2 does in terms of application, in terms of architecture, in terms of whatever. So, and vice versa. So the layer 2 sees the layer 1 as a database where to dump information in order basically to make sure that all the transactions are actually settled. But apart from knowing a little bit how this database works, they have no say in the internal mechanism of the database itself, right? This for what concerns layer 2s and layer 1. For what concerns Dusk, Dusk is the Dusk data and settlement service and is the Dusk application layer. So the fact that we are going to start, for instance, with two different nodes, so the provisioner on DuskDS and on an optimistic node on DuskEVM, this is basically just an implementation detail, and where we are going is actually in converging the two into one, eventually just one executable that has different kind of components. This is exactly the case also in Dusk as is right now, because Dusk as is right now, Rask, as a matter of fact, features a prover, features an archival node, features even applications like, for instance, the block explorer or the wallet. Those are all parts of Rask. And anybody can choose what to run, right? So you can compile Rask only with a prover, if you want your prover, and that's it. You can run only the consensus, the provision, without really bothering with anything else. You can have a full node with an archival and everything else. And that's basically just one code base. Moving forward, we are going to have exactly the same thing. Now, what does that mean in practice? It means in practice that we can also, the DuskDS can also makes assumption. It's not that it needs to remain independent on a random layer 2 that tomorrow comes and start to basically post blobs on DuskDS. It can happen. It will eventually happen, but DuskEVM is seen as part of Dusk, and therefore, basically, it will have transactions and it will have behaviors that DuskDS can recognize, and DuskDS can do validation that, for instance, Ethereum cannot do. This is basically what Hein means when we are talking about pessimistic optimism, as a matter of fact. Because when we can do proofs, because we can actually enter in the merit of what the applications are doing in terms of transaction, then we can actually even understand and check what goes on the on the application layer. And because of that, we do not need an extensive challenge period, which is basically what optimism does. Which why? Because optimism needs that, because there cannot be a proof. It's not a zero-knowledge rollup, so there is no proof of correctness of the different kind of state transitions that the layer 2 posts on the layer 1. Whereas in DuskEVM, we can, in fact, just delegate the consensus to actually prove that all things that are, in fact, posted, the state transition, are, in fact, correct. So we do not need to wait idle for somebody to post a fraud proof. The fraud proof is going to be part of all the different kind of consensus operations. And because of that, we have the best of the both worlds. We have the capability of actually having immediate finality, which is basically the immediate finality, which is a characteristic of zero-knowledge rollups, and the speed of an optimistic rollup. So we don't have to have the technical overhead of actually having to prove everything, the state transition, in a zero-knowledge machine. And at the same time, we can have the same kind of certainty that the state transition is correct without having to rely on a fraud proof, meaning basically a week, 2 days, a minute, whatever, or period of challenge that remains open. And then after this challenge goes, we can say, hey, nobody challenged, so it means that it's okay, that we don't have that. We have a superior settlement methodology. This is also the reason why we are not talking about layer 1 and layer 2, because we do not want to give the idea that these are actually two separate, different kind of networks that do not know about each other. They do know about each other, and because of that, we are actually going to be much more efficient than zero-knowledge rollups and optimistic rollups.
Another fun fact is they're also quantum resistant. But
the best of all worlds.
Just as a whole.
It's a layer 1.5, or I don't know. We need a new terminologies, because this is different. You don't usually see this. And thank you, Emma, for that explanation. That actually makes me understand it quite a lot more as well. Now we are continuing.
Our notes will be like Microsoft Office, right? You can choose between Word and spreadsheet. Okay. Let's not do Microsoft here. Let's go on.
I don't know how many people are fans. Yeah. We're going to continue with DuskEVM, but now there's a question around the audit. We already talked about the audit, that we don't need a DuskEVM audit, because it does use the optimism stack, which is stable and it's trustworthy. But people are also wondering if there is a need for the bridge for DuskEVM.
Yeah, well, so the first thing to mention is because we are not reinventing the wheel here, right? So we're not building everything from scratch ourselves. We can rely on the work that others have done. And what others have done is there are already audits out there, right, for the underlying contracts and for the network in certain aspects. So we can build on top of that, right? When it comes to the bridge, these contracts, to my knowledge, have also been audited. So the parts that we do not touch do not need an extra check. What will need an extra check is the port that we do. but these do not require the sort of rigorous auditing that we've done in the past. We have a lot of eyes on this, so we have the people that we have internally that are checking the bridge logic, whether that aligns with the specification. And we have the external team that's working for us that didn't develop the contracts themselves that are also reviewing this.
Also, if I may add my 2 cents here, so I already spoke about the fact that we are helped by the Valiant team of Lumos, and Lumos is a spin-off of Blaze, which is an auditing company, and they made the audit for CADcast. So they are, in fact, there is a sort of it comes sort of with a package. The fact that Lumos is operating on DuskEVM, and they are obviously also having an influence on DuskDS, but the contracts of DuskDS, especially the bridge one, they are done by us, and therefore basically they are reviewed by them in a sort of organic auditing that they are doing, which is as formal as basically the auditing that they have been doing for CADcast, with the exception that right now they are using that part of the bridge. So it's not only just checking the code, is also checking the code and using it, which I believe is actually a higher form of security check. So I think
reviewing and testing.
Yeah, so I think it's sort of an integral part of our development cycle. Basically, the fact that an informal and organic audit is carried on by our development partner.
Yeah, usually when there's an audit, there's also a report, but I do not suspect we will publish a report about this because it's a port, right? So like Emma said,
actually, we could.
Testing.
Actually, we could. To be honest, I mean, we have the overall diagrams of the bridge, the overall analysis that have been done. So we could do that. But again, does this serve the goal of getting to the application as soon as possible, or it creates a little bit more reassurance over the overall protocol? Can't hear a thing. Sorry, is it me?
No,
I can hear you guys well. Yeah. Jens might be.
Well, hopefully the the recording is going to be clear for everybody if something just catches down.
So yeah.
All right.
And I must say, our analysis of the bridge has also been extremely extensive. Like we have quite scary flow diagrams for this thing. So
there shouldn't be any worries of security-wise. People's money are going to be in good hands. But also, I think it wasn't necessarily security or a risk question. I think people are also in the same kind of mindset of, how do we get to market as soon as possible? And I guess a lot of them were worried that, if there's going to be an audit, then probably we're going to have to wait a couple more weeks, months, who knows? But that's not the case, guys. So, but that doesn't mean that that it's not secure. It's just as secure. But we're not going to have to need to wait more for an audit. So that's great. That's great. Everyone's going to love to hear that.
Yeah, and I must say we are doing pretty deep validation as well, right? So it's not like we take the time to do that. So there is a trade-off here. So you're doing validation, but you do them on testnets. For example, the transaction I sent from DevNet is already an example of a blog post, right? So those will happen more and more, and we will put it more publicly. And there will also be a testnet, I hope, quite soon, because I've been pushing for that to happen.
Very.
Yeah. So
sweet.
And then people can also start playing with it, right? So they can take some Dusk and deploy some tokens on or whatever they want on DuskEVM, and then hopefully when we launch, we will have some Uniswap forks and whatever beautiful things from the community as well, right?
Superb. Love to hear it. And actually, getting back to your quantum resistance mention, Void Sculptor is asking if does that mean that Dusk is quantum resistant, or it's just the DuskEVM part?
DuskEVM part.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying.
We have some quantum resistant components in our stack, but also those that are not quantum resistant. So yeah, I mean it's always a thing.
I just have to say that I have no idea what that means, but it sounds really cool. Just from a non-technical guy here. Now, getting to the juicy part, because a lot of people have been asking about it, and I saved this one for a little bit at the end. Could we have some updates on the progress of DuskEVM? We already kind of did. You mentioned, the blob transaction has been finished, but people are asking what is done and what is being worked on from a tech standpoint before DuskEVM is ready for release. And no estimations. It's not about timelines. They just kind of want to understand the process and the progress of what finalized and what still needs to be done.
Yeah, so the blob transaction side is one big thing, right? That is inside of DevNet right now, so that's being tested and validated. There is some UI elements that we need to do. So, for example, having blob support in the Explorer and the bridging capabilities in the web wallet. So those have been spec'd out, but are not yet in development. That's something that's coming up. Then you have the blob sidecar that is being validated together with the blob transactions. There is message passing between the networks that has a service running but still needs some more alignment work. We have two primary contracts that are being developed. One is the standard bridge, the L1 standard bridge, which allows you to bridge Dusk between the two networks. That is still in development but quite far. And we have the data availability contract, which is being worked on. But as far as I know, it's already deployed on DevNet and being validated as well. So I'm not sure if I missed anything, but
well, a couple of things to add to that. So while it is a very good representation of the work that is still in development. Let's put it that way. It is also true that basically these kind of operations pertain to the to DuskDS. What does that mean? It means that at some point it would be actually very good to be able to look at the blob transaction over our Explorer. And it's actually quite good also to be able to post or to integrate the blob stuff. Now, when we are talking about blob, you can think about metadata that pertain to the state transitions that is posted by the application layer. However, while these things are absolutely important to have, these things do not impact the capability of the application layer to post the state transition to DuskDS. That is basically what the blob transaction is for. So having the blob transaction there means essentially that DuskDS is already functional to the application layer. Of course, we want to use everything. We want to have the complete package. But as a matter of fact, one thing that I'm actually pushing for is to have the application layer out as soon as possible, even if we take our time to make sure that everything is actually nicely displayed on DuskDS.
Yeah, exactly. So the primary thing is here, we have a phased approach to the development of DuskEVM. And one of the first milestones there is the data availability aspect, right? And that is primarily being validated now. So it's the blob transactions. The network can be deployed with the contracts not living on Dusk yet, but the posting of the state transitions on Dusk. So that's something that's being validated. And then there is a contract that will come after. It's already deployed on on DevNet, but it's not strictly a necessity to have it in place, which will validate that people indeed did post and that the data is still available on the node. So yeah, and we will go step by step, but the thing is, we obviously want a testnet out as quickly as possible, because then we can also say to partners and to people in the community, hey, go play with it, right? Go deploy some things, get used to it, because I assume there are going to be also people in the community who might want to deploy a thing or two without us looking, right? So we definitely want to give them the room. But just to be clear, there is no implementation difference in the EVM. So everything you do on for example, an Ethereum testnet is one-to-one usable on DuskEVM.
Even Uniswap, Aave, Curve,
right. Any EVM compatible.
A lot of different other applications.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Thank you, guys. Now we usually try to keep these around like 45 minutes, but of course there's like a backlog of questions. So I wanted to ask you guys if you want to stay a bit more to answer one or two more questions, or should we save them for the next Team Hangout?
I'm fine with one question each.
Okay. Okay. Okay, let's just go into it. One question. So a hypothetical question. With DuskEVM, we get a full-fledged EVM with extra Dusk goodies. That means that the possibilities become almost unlimited regarding dApps. What would be the technical limitation for a bank like BankQ, a Dutch digital bank, to fully switch to something like Dusk? Besides the bank license issues, the founder of BankQ once exclaimed how crazy hard that was, to the point that it was almost unrealistic.
I like this one for Emma, actually.
Okay. So the not even sure where to start actually, to be honest, in addressing this question. So from a pragmatic perspective, the capability of switching a banking infrastructure to blockchain, doesn't matter, Dusk, Ethereum, whatever, is nearly impossible. And it is nearly impossible because because it is going to be completely, it doesn't really serve the purpose. It doesn't really fit any kind of regulation. Why? Because banks, they are institutions that have very, very, very strict policies. 95% of these policies have got to do with scapegoating. Just put it bluntly, is about finding the scapegoat if everything comes crashing down. So in a decentralized environment, there isn't such a thing as a scapegoat. There are security mechanisms that depends on a plurality of different participants that, in fact, harmoniously do something or operate the network, operate the product, without really any one of them in particular having responsibility over the entirety of the protocol. So either these banks essentially just implement all this centralized, scapegoat-friendly architecture using DLT, which essentially means having a database that is so clunky and absolutely horrible in terms of performance, because guess what? Between a blockchain and a database, the database is going to be 10,000 more efficient and probably 1 billion times less expensive than a blockchain, or banks or the regulation policies are going essentially to go on a completely different direction, and they will embrace decentralization. If that happens, then it would make sense for banks, quote unquote, to adopt whatever kind of DLT they feel is the closest to their shtick. But At the same time, this means that we are not going to have banks anymore. So I fail to I fail to imagine a world in which a bank willingly displays itself in the name of a greater good. That and the fact that basically Dusk is not trying to create a banking infrastructure. This is something that is so almost trivial for us to do, and there are many other protocols that do that, and they are much better than Dusk in that. I mean, even Bitcoin, if you will, has the the kind of liquidity and monetary security to absolve the function of a decentralized bank much better than anything else. And if you want to have kind of stable coin aspect, then yes, sure, Dusk could definitely be used. Anything else could be used. But again, I don't see that really happening. Dusk is basically about creating a decentralized infrastructure that, in fact, kind of permeates and penetrates the different kind of backend of different institutions and provides immediate and very convenient and efficient settlement capabilities, clearance capabilities, security trading capabilities, and what we call essentially Reg DeFi, so regulated decentralized finance capability. That's what we are here for. Banking is just having custody of value, essentially, and make sure that this value can be transmitted across different kind of networks and protocols. It is something that we can definitely do, but the part that is very hard is to fit the regulations and policies to be able to provide a bank infrastructure and one that is not complete. Is not very feasible from a pragmatic approach perspective.
I mean, we inherently do this already in a very tiny way, right? But not as like as more as a byproduct of what we do, right? So yeah.
Yeah, no, but even okay. So just to elaborate a little bit more, I mean, even Quantos, right, or other kind of coin is another one. So Monerium, for instance, just provide the capability for people to have an IBAN, to have an interface between fiat and stable coins and digital money. If you remove that, if you have that and you have the capability of custody, then what is a bank for? What remains? I mean, there isn't really anything. The capability of, drive liquidity here and there, but you can create tools for that. So
right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Especially with rich ecosystems, you already have this capability.
Yeah, right. Now, Hein, let me get the question for you. This is a two-part question, but I'm not sure if we have the details for the first part, but the second part might be more interesting. So the first part is, what are the specification of DuskEVM in terms of like throughput, block times, gas limit? I'm not sure if we have more details about that yet, but you can tell us. And then the second part would be, how does DuskEVM compare to other L2s, and how can Dusk Infra benefit from these specifications over the L1?
Yeah, so when it comes to the parameters of DuskEVM, we're just sticking to the defaults for now. The throughput, we have to test what it practically is, because I'm not exactly sure yet what a fully populated blob would look like, and what sort of implications that has. But there are theoretical throughputs on Optimism, like 1,000 transactions per second. And there shouldn't be any blocker for us to facilitate that, given that we allow for the blob size in a similar way that Ethereum does. So it should be quite nice, and that is without further tuning.
Actually, I've been talking with Seppi about just this, and we have been talking also about the kind of volume of blobs. So Ethereum, for instance, has different kind of blobs, right? So in our case, we are not really expecting more than blob from one application layer, and then when that's VM, then we will have a second blob. But this means essentially just a very limited amount of blobs. So it means that we can actually even inflate the capabilities that these blobs have, because we are not going to be having a multiplicity of that. And even then, if we really need to regulate that and tune it up a little bit, because there are different other layer 2 that settle on Dusk, then we can always change it later. But this means basically that I do expect basically the throughput to be much better from the one of Ethereum, for instance, considering that Ethereum provides or has multiple different layer 2s that are constantly posting blobs on the layer 1, on the Ethereum layer. It is also true that this is not exactly, it doesn't mean that we are going to have 5 times the capacity, 5 throughput, or 6 times, because we have 6 times less blobs. Also because we want to do something with the data of the blob, whereas Ethereum doesn't do anything. So that is also we are also probably going to be bound to the proofs, to the consensus that will carry on a little bit more work compared to Ethereum, but the application layer by itself should have a very, very similar capabilities to what we are seeing on Optimism right now, including the capability of having a block time that is much shorter, obviously, than the one on DuskDS.
Yeah, well, the thing is, we can tune this, right? It's not a problem. We have a lot of freedom in that regard. The 1K limit that I set is a limit that we saw with Get itself, right? In its current form, with its current parameters. So we can tune that, and in theory, because of the way that Optimism is set up, this probably triggers you would say it, but what we could also do is, for example, add multiple different app style DuskEVM instances alongside what we have, even for institutions if we need to, right? But we're talking about a speed here that at the point where we reach that capacity, I think we all can be very happy. So I don't think that is something that we have to worry about too much, right? There's so much overcapacity, even on DuskDS itself, that it's a lot that can be done. Like, people often use these numbers actively, like a very important measure, right? For example, like I don't want to negatively talk about other projects, but there are projects that focus heavily on the TPS metric, but then in practice they either never reach those levels or even close to a difference from, for example, Ethereum with the L2s combined. And if they do, it's usually quite useless low-value transactions. And the question is, do we even care about low-value transactions? I would rather have, let's say, 100 transactions happening on a daily basis with 1 million value each, than 100,000 transactions with 1 cent values, right? Because it just pollutes the state of a network. Like, what are we gaining here? That's nothing.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not always about quantity, but also about the quality. In short.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think that answers that question. Thank you so much, guys. It's almost the top of the hour, so I don't want to take too much time, but I do want to say a big thank you to Hein for joining us in this Team Hangouts. It was nice to have you on, and I'm sure the community really enjoyed it. And we actually got through a lot of questions, more than I thought. So this was very effective. Nice one. And of course, Emma, thank you as well. It's great to have these on a weekly basis. It is starting to become kind of like a habit. Yeah, these are fun. Getting a lot of answers to the community.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
Well,
Thank you, guys.
we're hope we're gonna have you on more often, or at least next time.
I'm gonna hide a little bit. There's enough stuff to do, right? So.
Fair enough. Yeah, until DuskEVM is out, we're probably maybe gonna see you afterwards. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming in.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks to the community for here and for keep supporting us. I'll see you next week.